I always look forward to the photographic competition on the highlights of the year. Unusually, because we're using my laptop, I've actually seen some of the photos, and you're in for a treat. I can guarantee it. So, anybody on Zoom, if you get any sound problems, please do let Elaine know. She's hosting today. But if you just put it in the chat, then it'll be coming up for her. We have one new member to welcome. That's Steve Clark. And anybody here who isn't a member, if you were watching the introductory slides, you'll see that we always welcome people to join. Have a look at our website. I've actually got a couple of application forms with me tonight. Please, we always welcome new people. Right, we've got a few announcements, not many tonight, before we get on to the main event. Our last indoor meeting of the season is in 2 weeks' time. That's the Silent Spring by Connor Jameson on the 3rd of April in here, as usual. We've got 3 outdoor meetings coming up before the next indoor meeting. This Saturday on the 23rd, there's the introduction to Berkshire birding at Coomgibbet. Should have been Peter Driver leading that, but unfortunately he's not well. But Chris Foster's going to take over instead. So please do get in touch quickly if you want to do that one. On the 25th, so that's next Monday, there's a joint NDOC BOC trip to Fish Lake Meadow and Tess Marsh, which is being run by Bob Lyle. And then the Sunday afterwards, the 31st, Rob Godden is taking a trip to Pagham Harbour for the day. That should have been by minibus, but unfortunately that's not available now. So it'll be by car. But please do let him know if you want to go, to make sure everybody can have lifts and so on. That's on Easter Sunday. And a reminder that the Bird Fair trip on July the 13th is by minibus. And when I wrote the notes earlier, I was going to say it was half full, but since I've had 4 more bookings this evening, it's nearly full. So if you want to go, let me know as soon as you can, preferably tonight or very soon, because otherwise it's going to be full. Right. If anybody, by the way, have we got some copies of the programme with us, if anybody wants some? Yeah, if anybody needs a copy of our programme, we've got some here. A few other announcements to the other organisations. NDOC, their next outdoor meetings on Saturday, the 6th of April to Spenmoors. RSPB Reading Local Group, their next indoor meeting is on the 9th of April, a Tuesday. And some of you may find the name familiar. What's the difference between a bittern and a curlew, which you might remember we've already had this season from Mike Coker. But if anybody missed it, of course, that's a good opportunity. Their next outdoor trip is on Tuesday, the 16th of April, when they go into Bowdown Woods. And sorry, Bowdown. Bowdown. You can tell I've never been. And the other RSPB group, Wokingham and Bracknell, their next indoor is on Thursday, the 11th of April. Who've got the same speakers we've got on our last meeting. So it's Connor Jameson talking about looking for the goshawk. And the next outdoor meeting for them on the 27th of March, where they've got a morning at Wishmore Bottom and a day trip on the 13th of April, a Saturday, to Titfield Haven. So lots coming up. If you want any details of any of those, come and see me in the break. I've got all the contact details and so on, or I can point you in the right direction. Right, what about recent sightings though? What have you been, anybody's been seeing anything out there noteworthy? Anybody got to grip with a white-tailed eagle yet? Or is that still elusive for most of you? Oh, it's very quiet here. Have you got anybody on cattle eagle, Andy? Where?
Chamber House.
Chamber House. Chamber House Farm, cattle eagle.
Thousands.
So if the best way to see it is, I have to repeat it because I can't hear you on Zoom. Repeat it is to go over from the farmhouse to
It's Chamber House.
Chamber House Marsh.
Very flooded. Very wasted. Walking over the pedestrian footbridge over the main railway line.
Okay, so the only way, because it's flooded, is over the pedestrian footbridge over the railway line.
And look for the cattle.
And look for the cattle. Yeah. I like that about cattle egrets. Make life a little easier. I can see that a lot of the summer migrants already started. The first sand martins have been reported, and duck singing and a few blackcaps. Sorry, Andy?
Wheat ears today.
And wheat ears, lovely. So has anybody on Zoom been out seeing anything special? Nothing. Well, there's lots of birds about. We obviously none of us think they're noteworthy. Right, well, talking to lots of birds, let's move on and on to the main event. Now, it's a slightly different format this year, the photographic competition. After feedback from last year, we've revised it. I say we, Jane has really, but we've still got the 3 categories that we've had before, and there will still be an overall winner at the end, which the audience will be voting for. So like the last few years, well, I think for as long as I can remember, you will get a chance to vote at the end. But we've restricted it to only 4 entries per person, so maximum of 4, which has resulted from what Jane tells me, more people entering. We've actually had 27 people photographs in this year, which is 4 or 5, did you say, more than usual? Good. And another departure is we only have 1 judge who will be judging everything. So rather than in the last few years, we've been just showing some photos and they haven't been commented on, they've just been flashed past. Every photo will be seen and shown and commented on. Our judge will then choose the winner, the runner-up, and any he feels should be commended in each category. Okay. So we'll do the 2 of the categories before break, and then the last one after. And like that. I will just get Jane to give us a wave because she's done all the hard work of organising this. But she has just said if anybody else would like to take over next year, she'd be more than happy. So do think about that. But secondly, I'd like to introduce you to our judge for this year, who's Derek Gale. He is not only a professional photographer. Yeah, go on. He's not only a professional photographer, but also an experienced judge who gives very well received talks to camera clubs and groups. I believe.
You've been looking at my website.
I have indeed. Based in Worcester, so he's come a few miles to see us tonight. And I actually would recommend looking at his website because there's some lovely photos. Very interesting indeed. Right, we're going to start now, once I make sure the technology is working, with the portrait group. So I'm hoping that I can remember how to do this. And that's what I intended, honest. Just need to share that with the people on Zoom. So you can should be able to step through it as you like on there now.
Just check that it's working.
No, that didn't work very well, did it? Just make sure I'm on. It's not working. What's going on, is it? Good point. Let me just try doing that again.
So while we're sorting out the technology, so my name's Derek Gale, and I've got to stand in a position so that the people on Zoom can see quite why they would want to see me. I don't know. So
it's more that they can hear you, Derek.
More that they can hear me.
That's
so my name's Derek Gale. I'm a professional photographer based in Worcester, but I used to be in a village called Watchfield, which is near Shrivenham. But I used to work at the Grassland Research Institute at Hurley near Maidenhead, and I used to live in Reading. So it's changed quite a lot since I moved, but I definitely used to live in Reading for 9 years. So, and I am a photography trainer. So I teach people. I used to lead photography holidays for HF Holidays, who you've probably heard of, some of you. But I now no longer do that. But I also do my own quite abstract fine art photography, and I took part in Worcestershire Open Studios last year, but I'm not taking part in Worcestershire Open Studios this year because it's not happening. Otherwise, I would be. And yesterday, I was up at the photography show at the NEC. Anybody go to the photography show at the NEC? And I had an opportunity to go to a talk by a guy called Andrew Fusek-Peters, who you may have heard of. And I've met him a few times. He's about up here. I always feel utterly inadequate standing next to him. I get a stiff neck. He's based in Shropshire, and I met him probably in early 2018 when he came to the HF Holidays house. I was at the Longmynd House. Scary. At the HF Holidays house in Church Stretton. And he gave a talk about his wildlife photography. And at the time, he was using Canon APS-C with big lenses, great big lenses, and carrying all this big stuff about. And I was talking to him about Micro Four Thirds that I use. And he said, I can't ever see myself using Micro Four Thirds. And he was at the OM Systems stand yesterday because he is now an OM Systems ambassador using Micro Four Thirds. He said he would never use anything else now because it's so much micro and easy to carry about. But his bird photography that he showed quite a lot of is absolutely fantastic. And it's his job. He's a professional wildlife photographer. He's had stuff on covers of newspapers, magazines, BBC Wildlife, Country Life, all that stuff. Just unbelievably good. And I'm going to try and judge today. Well, obviously, I've looked at the images before. I'm going to try and judge today. I've done lots of photography judging, and there are certain things that help images win competitions. Now, normally with bird photography, you're not taking an image to win a competition. I suspect that most of your photography is to identify the bird and get a good record of that bird in that location, and not necessary, oh, I'll enter that in the competition. But once you have entered it in a competition, certain guidelines, rules, ideas will apply. So ideally, it needs to be in focus where it needs to be in focus. It needs to be well exposed where it needs to be well exposed. And it needs to be well composed. Now, if I look at somebody, Sue, for example, I look at Sue, she is the center of my field of vision. She is completely the object of my attention. And when you look through a camera lens, very often, there's a bird over there, you look at the bird's in the center of the frame. For a competition, that isn't always the best place for the bird to be. So you need to be composing your image. And I remember when I used to be the chairman of the Grassland Photographic Society at Hurley, we had a judge came around called Trevor Ponting, who was a fantastic judge, who had this is projecting slide. He had some cardboard cutouts that sat in front of the projector, and he would mask the image, crop the image to get rid of all the stuff you don't need, and put the subject in the right place. So I'm going to be talking about that sort of thing when I'm judging. Even though there's not lots and lots and lots of entries this year, there are still quite a lot. And I am aware that I've got 100 miles to drive home after this. So that's it. Thank you very much indeed. I was in a pantomime in February, and I'm still trying to come out of that. So I won't necessarily be able to give extensive comments about every image because there's a lot of images to go through. But I have is it working now? Yes. So I'm going to go through every image. So I'm going to just flash through them quickly to start with, just a few seconds each, so that you can get an idea of what's there, and then go back to the beginning, and then comment on each one. Yeah. So just be a couple of seconds. It's doing some dynamic frame filling, isn't it?
Yeah, I don't know how you stop that with the council.
To now go. Not
It might be because it's full frame, full screen. That's what the problem was earlier.
right. So I'm just trying to get back to the heron and it's not going back to the heron.
Paintball is inside.
So I used to do portrait photography as a job. And there's a rule in portrait photography, which is that you get the eyes in focus. And if you've got the eyes in focus, then whatever else you get in focus is an advantage. But if you've got the eyes in focus, that's essential. I borrowed a 85mm f1.4 lens at one point, unbelievable thing. And with that, you could almost choose which part of the eye was in focus. Color. So I'm judging these as portraits, but also an idea of the bird in this environment. What's the environment for something like a heron? Well, very often next to a river. So it's filling the frame nicely. And it's looking in the right direction, or is it? We read from left to right generally, so we could argue that we're following the heron and then it's going out of the frame off to one side. But it's generally sharp enough, and it's got a not very confusing foreground and a simple background, although it doesn't look like a river, but they do just go off about doing nothing a lot of the time, don't they? So although it's a good 4-square image of that heron, it's reasonably good for exposure. I'll come on to white birds in sunshine and exposure. It's not got selected into the next. Why did I put something to change there? It hasn't. So where do these live? They live on the seashore, and here we've got the bird, no distractions in the background, but it's reasonably good size in the frame, and it's got a reasonably sharp eye. One thing that birds quite often, you need enormously big, powerful telephotos to get them reasonably big in the frame if they're a distance away. And sometimes if they're not very big in the frame, it's tempting to make them bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. Just keep cropping in, and you get the bird the right size, but you lose image quality. And image quality loss can make it look very oil painterly. And there are a few images like that in this selection. But here we've got a bird standing around in the waves, waiting to peck around and get some invertebrates from in front. I think it could do with a crop off the top, because this light area on the top is just my eye. And although the tones of the bird match the tones down here, I think it's lacking a bit in something for my mind. This is clearly a blue-mantled thornbill, not a UK native, that's a guess. And the great advantage of using long telephoto lenses is that you get the opportunity to throw the background out of focus because you've got a good distance between the bird and the background. Using a long telephoto lens, which has got a very limited depth of field, you focus on the bird, the background goes out of focus. So you lose all those distracting shapes and colours in the background. And this is very well controlled. The background's lovely, nice and diffuse. And the bird itself is well rendered. I would argue that it's got a bit too much headroom and that you could crop off this. Now, with portraits, you do need some space of the subject's head. Otherwise, it feels like they're about to hit the head on the top of the frame. But here, I think you've got a bit more that you could play with, and perhaps a bit off the left-hand side, just to tighten up the composition. But it's a good profile portrait of that bird, and he captured that iridescence and detail on the feathers really well. it's interesting, this owl, because because of the sort of the way that the background has happened, I was looking up around these sort of ear feathers up here, and they're really sort of fuzzy. That one particularly is blended into a sort of shape in the background, and it makes it look really sort of double imagey. Because otherwise, you know, the bird's well placed in the frame. You've got a good support over here. It's standing on that branch. There's another branch which is behind it, and it's looking dead straight at the camera. So you've got, you know, that gaze, a portrait. You've got that communication between you and the bird. And there's some lovely color rendering here. I would probably just have lifted up the exposure on the bird a bit more. You would have washed out some of the background detail, but I think it's a little bit too dark in the face. I don't know how much manipulation you allow in this competition, but you know, we're losing detail down here. It's a bit too shady, and it's generally a little bit less bright than I would want it to be. You bring that up in post-production or lift it up a bit during the exposure, so then you get a bit more of the brightness of the bird shining through. Why is it called a yellow leg? It's very useful, isn't it, when they name birds after things that are easy to remember, like a blue tit and a great tit and a long-tailed tit, which isn't a tit. Starts getting confusing when you call things that aren't actually what they are. But here you've got a wader wading, you've got the environment it's in, and it's a nice profile image. I think it's been pulled up quite a lot. We're losing a bit of image softness there, I think. Foreground, I like this. I don't mind the out of focus bit here, but again, I would crop off a bit of the left-hand side so that it's looking into that space. You've got the bill going into that area there, and I think it would work better as a composition without more space behind the bird. But it's, you know, there's no distractions in it at all. And you know, the legs, okay, there's a shadow on this one, which means that leg's wholly yellow and that one's only partly yellow because you've got the bird's rump or something hitting it. But you know, it's a good simple composition. You did not see this when you took the picture, I'll bet. Now, one of the things that the top Olympus cameras have got is a thing called Pro Capture, where you half press the shutter, and it's got different speeds depending on whether you want the focus to continue or whether you want the focus locked. And you half press the shutter and you're wanting something to happen. And then when you see it happen, you finally press the shutter. Of course, by the time you've seen it happen, it's too late. But when you half press, the camera's already started taking pictures, full resolution images, and it will take like up to 30 or whatever, and then it will throw the first one away and then take another one, throw the first, and moving along. So when you press the shutter fully, at some point in your sequence of images, there will be the absolutely right version that you want, the point of action. And it makes life a bit easier. One of the camera bodies I've got's got Pro Capture, and it does make it interesting. As long as the bird, insect, or whatever you're trying to photograph doesn't fly that way or that way or that way and go out of focus. But it is very, very good. And Andrew Fusek-Peters' images, he uses Pro Capture a lot to get birds in incredible positions that he would not have been able to do if he just watched it and pressed it. And when you press the shutter button, you didn't see this bee arrive. And that's fantastic when this bee's come, it's because it's made it a bit more interesting. So you've got this female black cat, which is looking that way, away from the bee. Wouldn't it be great if it was a bee eater looking towards the bee? But it's not. But you know, the background's nice. The background, you know, well controlled, bit of green tells you where it is. The foreground, I think you don't need this lump because it's a bright out of focus area, and because you've got a lot of empty space over here, I also don't think you need the left. And having that is a tighter composition. But it's a really nice thing. The bird's well rendered, nice sharp eye, and then you've got this bee turning up afterwards, which brings a little bit of a story into it, as well as, you know, not just a port the bird, which I like. And I looked at this a few times and then went, "Oh, isn't it sweet?" Because I thought I didn't see that the chick, and that it's just adorable, isn't it? That little chick. You've got, you know, mum and dad, looking like proud parents. They're in amongst the reeds. There's lovely reflections of the reeds, and they're well placed in the frame. They're going that way into the space. There's nothing too distracting behind them. And you know that they're in similar head positions, and they're both about the level of focus as each other. I get the idea again. It's been pulled a little bit too much. We're losing a little bit of quality, but without that, it's not as interesting. But with that little one, with that fantastically and head, it just lifts it and makes it a much more interesting image. And that's probably what's caught your attention. You're that chick, it's fantastic. Penguins on a beach, a sandy beach in the sunshine. We were in Cape Town. My wife and I were in Cape Town probably 10 years ago now, and we went down to see the penguin colony, and there were people there walking into the middle of the group's penguins with their cameras, trying to get selfies with them. Just leave them alone. You know, how would you feel if somebody did that to you in your life? But here we've got a penguin, good simple composition. We've got the sea at the top, gives us the context, a matching area here of this water and rock about the same size as the area of the sea up there, and then an area underneath the penguin of about the same. So it's divided up quite nicely into those rectangles, and the bird itself is well rendered, other than the white feathers in the sunshine thing. And it's so easy with white birds. I mean, I'm from Worcester, and we've got a swan sanctuary in the middle of it, and there are hundreds of swans. And people feed the swans regularly. There's a swan feeding station, which then gets mobbed by hundreds of gulls. And you think, oh, where do they all come? Then they're not there. How do they know? They're not there. People start feeding, and then there's hundreds of gulls flying around. And there wasn't one in sight anywhere when they started feeding them. It's absolutely fascinating. Swans, birds like this, where you've got white feathers in sunshine, it's really easy to overexpose the feathers and just get undifferentiated white. Far better to underexpose a little bit and then bring it back in processing. Because once you overexpose that, imagine it's like a slide, you've lost the detail and it's impossible to get it back. So underexpose a bit, and I saw a picture recently, which was of a cattle egret in a dark area. He had to underexpose it 3.5 stops to get the exposure right on the egret's feathers. Everything else went really dark. So it's this fantastic white bird surrounded almost by blackness. It's really powerful. But underexposed so that you retain that detail, and that comes up in a few images. Looking fab. Perched up on a tree, always a sign of winter when these arrive, I always think. And when you're walking in the country, they're always walking away, flying away from you, aren't you? You can never get, they just keep going down the hedgeline with you. So it's sharp enough. It's starting to get some JPEG-y effects around on the edges, but it's on a food plant. It's got a beautiful blue sky, very simple composition. Again, I would just tighten it up a bit in order to just make it even crisper in its position than it is at the moment. Puffins are sweet, are they not? And it's not a dead profile. Dead profile is good for a record, but it's like you said, hey Puffin, turn and look towards me. What? Then you press click. I used to do that when I did portrait photography. Turn and look towards me, and they turn over their shoulder, and it just adds an extra bit of shape because you get this sort of S curve through the body and then over the top of the beak. Again, well-controlled background, not out of focus, but not overexposed. But once again, we've lost the detail around here. It's just gone into diffuse white, so underexposed a bit more. You still be able to lift up this feather detail, which is fantastic, but you'll keep that feather detail there. So underexposure is your friend. You're trying to photograph a white bird, or just don't try and photograph white birds. No, obviously you can't do that. So underexposure, and there is an example in one of the other groups of the sort of feather detail of white bird that you get if you get your exposure absolutely right, and the detail is just fantastic. So lovely little birds. Again, this is the bird in the center of the frame. So if you do your diagonals from the corner, you've seen the bird in the middle of the frame, and then you haven't reframed, get the composition right for a competition, because when you took it, you didn't think, I'll enter that. I'll take a picture of this and enter it in a competition. So this is lovely. The angle of the bird on the lichen coloured branch is great. The background is really good, but out of focus blurry leaf, you could crop that away. In fact, almost turn it into a portrait format image rather than a landscape format image, because this isn't really what we want to look at. It's nice that it's got similar tones to bird, but it's out of focus, and that's what we want to look at, not these blurry tone tips. Much simpler if you get rid of the distractions. They're cheeky, aren't they? It's very selective. Yes, I only eat pine nuts. Are they organic? But you know, it's only when you start seeing them this close that you realise just how vulture-like they are around the top of the bill, but how gorgeous the iridescence is, and the iridescence, the detail of the colours and tones through there, and there's even in these shadow areas. We've lost a bit down here, but you think it's black. Not at all black, is it? It's just lovely what's happening with these colours and tones through here. And it's a sunny day because we've got a blue sky reflected in there. We've lost some detail on the plate. It's not white, it's enough out of focus, I suppose. One thing as a human being, and well, I do anyway, is if I see any writing in a picture, I start wanting to read it. And here we've got a 5. This is table number 50. So here we've got a 5. And I keep seeing that 5 and wanting to look at the rook, and it's just, and it's fantastic detail. So I don't know if you could blur that in post-processing, because you can't really crop it off, and the foot would be close to the frame. But nice and simple. Now, you know, man-made environment, you've got a well-controlled brick, out-of-focus brick wall in the background. And it's very delicate, isn't it? Very delicate. Now, what do warblers do? They warble. And this one's giving it some beak, I believe is the phrase. I think it's rings actually, isn't it? But so it's really giving, you know, doing the song. And the bird itself is the same color as the material it's on. So the material isn't a distraction from the bird. And the bird is elongated and almost paralleling the shape of the thing that it's on. Beautifully controlled background. And I'm a big fan of corners. Corners in frames, because we're artificially placing a rectangle around a bit of the world, you may as well use the corners of that rectangle as part of your composition. And I'm always using things like Photoshop crop with perspective to tweak a corner so that I can get a line that's part of the composition to come exactly out of the corner, because I'm thinking might as well use it, but it's come close enough to it, and it's a lovely background. And don't you just love it, punk hairdo? Anybody in this room that hasn't seen all of these waxwings on the subject of punk hairdos that have been flying around? Because I've been seeing, oh yes, there's these waxwings all over the place. No, not where I've been. Yeah, they were in Worcester this week. Worcester this week. Haven't seen my film. Yeah, I really like the birds singing, beak open, and all the with the colour coordinated and complemented thing that it's on. There's a new course starting next week, Yoga for Coots. And it's not the downward dog, it's the downward coot, is what it's doing. But yeah, there's a lovely stretch going on, which is enabled, you've waited until it's done the stretch. And we've got this lovely detail through the primaries and the secondaries. There's lots of lovely feather detail, not the white bird, you get the detail. And, you know, the position of the foot and the position of the beak are parallel. So that's an interesting position that you normally see them just floating around. Unfortunately, there's a little bit complication going on in the foreground, and I would want the bird to be isolated. Now, I always suggest to photographers that they travel about with some secateurs. I did suggest a chainsaw, but they're not very popular these days. But I know you can't get rid of it, but and the bird will go where it wants to go. But I do find this foreground stuff a little bit distracting. It's a shame, because that in the middle is absolutely lovely. You know, little owls. I always think little owls look incredibly cross all the time, like this. And this one's got a little bit of that about it, to my mind. It's got that, you're looking at me, what are you doing in my environment? Look to it. But it's absolutely lovely with the tail fanned out, the bird sort of looking at you slightly askance, actually, with a well-controlled background. You know, there's lots of lovely bokeh effects going on in the background. I've actually got some big prints on the wall at home. If you imagine that image without the bird or the branch at the bottom, just completely out of focus shapes. So I do bird photography, but without the birds. But yes, it's nice and sharp. It's a different colour to the background. It's well separated, and the foreground is well controlled. So, you know, it's a good portrait of that bird, which is a very exotic thing, my eyes. Sweet. And I said about background control, absolutely clean background, apart from this little bit here, but isolating the bird very well into the background. Once again, it's in the middle, which is a shame. You've got a good separation of the beak and this sort of frosty plant that it's on. Lots of lovely feather detail, a good little catchlight in the eye. But if you look at it close up, I think it's been cropped and cropped and cropped. We're losing a bit of quality because otherwise, it's just a lovely little pose. Once again, I would probably lose something off the left-hand side, but yeah, very simple, very classical, good foreground, good background, well controlled.
Could you just ask what that bird was?
Juvenile? Winter plumage.
All the photos on the small screen should have their length. You can see that one.
I can't.
Oh, okay.
It's still on the top load,
Oh, okay.
so I don't want to touch anything and
Yeah,
make bad things happen.
Okay.
Marvelous bird is the pelican. Its beak can hold more than its belly can. So again, we've got simple background, bird in the foreground, simple background, bird in the foreground, very well controlled background, and a good shape on the bird with good feather detail, and the bird looking down its bill. Again, just a judicious crop on the left-hand side to make it a bit more metric, but nice and simple. And I said about the punk bird earlier on, the warbler. Here we've got this egret, Egrets, I've had a few, but then again, too few to mention. And it's quite an unusual image because it looks very punky. You've got these rather startling eyes, which are one's in shadow, but that doesn't bother me at all. And we have got some feather detail through here, and it's lovely backlit light feathers with a very well controlled background. So that's quite amusing, and it's an unusual portrait. Bigger again or smaller?
It'll stay at that one.
It'll stay that one.
I don't understand why it does it.
Good. So obviously a big bird, and off in the distance, and you've got good colour matching with the subject and the grasses in the foreground. You've got some greens to give us a little bit of contrast, and it's very simple. It's again a bit central in the frame. Like again, I would crop off to give it a bit more off-centeredness. But this is one that's split a bit by being enlarged rather too much, and it's lost too much detail around the head, that's for sure. And it's just too soft to do well in competition. That's doing the other thing. Beautiful feather detail through here, this sort of lovely green iridescence here, and a black background. So we had a couple with almost pure white backgrounds. Now we've got one with a black background, and look at what's happening with the reflection underneath. That's absolutely fab. And the reflection's got a bit more detail in these bright areas. We're just losing a little bit. It's got a bit more detail because we're losing some light intensity with the reflection because of the polarization of the water. But that's a nice bird and its reflection, very simple with a well-controlled black background. And we've gone now from a bird with a black background to a bird surrounded by plants which are reflecting into the water and making it lovely and green. But it's a blue sky day, so where the water's rippling, you're getting a reflection in patches of the blue in the sky. So you've got the green and the blue and some lovely little water droplets. Yeah, and it's got itself something sweet. So it's a nice, well-controlled foreground and background with some attractive colour patterns happening in it. I said about backgrounds, this is again a perfectly controlled background, long lens, good control of focus. So the bird itself it thinks it's the bee's knees, doesn't it? So it's well framed in the frame. We've got a line coming in from the corner a bit. Now, in a perfect world, you'd go forwards and just pull that little bit off there. But you can't do that. And in a wildlife competition, you can't go retouching things out. But it's a good size in the frame. It's got a lovely background, and there's lots of lovely detail in there as well. Robins, see them most days at home. They think we're pigs, don't they? Because they think we're like wild boar. So when we're gardening, they think we're wild boar, and they'll come and start doing what they do when they're following wild boar turn over the soil a lot, and they get in amongst the worms that the wild boar have left behind and whatever. Lovely background with these streaky lines happening in it, but I think the bird is a little bit underexposed. Lost some feather detail in here. We've got a nice little purple face, but we're losing detail. So because we've got this shady side, the camera's meter has said lovely background, but you just need a bit more light in there. Because I like the way it's in that shape, but it's just losing a bit of information. And great simple image. We've got light area, green area, and then this triangle in the middle with the puffin looking straight at you. But we are suffering again. They're a real pain, aren't they? Because they've got these really white faces where we're losing feather detail in here. But I like the simplicity of and the absolute symmetry of its facial expression. So I wouldn't crop it even because I like where it's placed. I said I don't like things absolutely in the centre of the frame. In this case, I do like it being in the centre of the frame because of the presentation of these green and white shapes up and down. we were down in Cornwall last year and did manage to see a chough. Although down on Gower, you know, in Pembrokeshire, oh, it's another chough. Oh, it's another chough. But they're splendid birds, and again, the camera's exposure meter, I think, has rendered the bird a little bit too dark because we're looking at the shadowed side of the bird. You need to lift the exposure on this black bird in order to get the detail there. Now you're going to get that really, really bright. So if you can move and get it so that you're looking at the illuminated side of the bird, then you won't start losing all the detail when you lift the exposure for that. But background's good, tells you it's up in the mountains somewhere. And this nice yellow beak and coloured legs make it easier to identify, but needs a bit more on the bird to give us what it actually looks like. And this is a real cliche, isn't it? Peacock. But you know, you've gone in really close when it's doing this thing, and you know, you've got the lovely iridescence here. The background's not distracting because the peacock put up its big eye feathers in the way for you, which is very obliging. And you know, it thinks it's the bee's knees again, doesn't it? And it's the noise they make when they're doing this as well. You know, everything's sort of rattling. You filled the frame. There's some lovely, lovely details going up here with the green in the background mixing with the blue of the feathers. So it really filled the frame with what we're interested in. And we're going to a cool palette, you know, the bluer end of the spectrum, to a much warmer color palette here. And I really like the way everything in this is sort of much the same color tone. So the background is much the same as the bird, the leaves on the trees. I've got the tones that the bird's got. The stem has got much the same tones. This feather detail in here, which is lovely, has got much the same sort of thing as what's happening here. And there's just a very nice feel about it, with a good twinkly eye, because we're looking at the sunny side of the bird. So I do like the way that everything in there complements the colour of the bird, and it's in an environment where you know it's actually going to be relatively unobtrusive to predators. This is not a bird that is unobtrusive. You've got this fantastically coloured, I won't try and pronounce the name, fantastically coloured bird. Again, we're looking at the shady side of it, so we've lost some colour in here, where as the camera said, oh, there's lots of light from these bright patches in the trees, and it's dropped the exposure a little bit, and this is where you need to use positive exposure compensation to lift it so that the bird, which is what you're interested in, is properly exposed. And here I think we're losing a bit. It's awfully close to the top of the frame, and it's gone off at the bottom. So I think it's actually you needed to come back a little bit to unzoom, to zoom out, so that we're not cropping it so close to the frame. But the main thing is that the bird's a little bit underexposed. You can lift that in post-processing, and then mask away the lifting so that it's only the bird that's lifted in exposure. I saw my first hoopoe last year in Sicily, having been to Spain and Portugal and Italy loads of times. Never seen one before. I was like, hoopoe. My wife said, oh yeah, well, when I was in Israel, we just saw them every day. I thought it's another hoopoe. But splendid birds, and it's, you know, the top of whatever that structure is, rock, going, hey, look at me, I'm shy and retiring, completely unobtrusive. Again, we've got a lot of space above it that we can need. Previously, the image was too close to the head. This one, I think the composition could be tightened up. We've got lovely lines coming in from the corners up to the bird. It's well rendered with lots of detail, a very simple background. So if I could just go back to this one, this is nice and sharp. We've got a good exposure and a good background. Here, the background is white, which is good, so it's not distracting. But I think we've got the same issue that I've mentioned with some of the other images, where shooting against a bright sky, you're losing detail on this side of the bird, which is not illuminated, and you need to lift your exposure again, the background isn't going to go any whiter. You need to lift your exposure again in order to start rendering the detail on the bird, rather than having this sort of lost detail with going into sort of one shade of brown. I also think it's been pushed a little bit too much in terms of cropping. So again, we've lost some detail, which is a shame, because it's in a good shape. Come up here, slight turn, you can see this hook beak, you can tell it means business. But I would want there to be a bit more quality in here by changing the exposure. As I said, you won't lose anything in the background, and try and get a bit closer. I don't know, but they're magnificent birds, are they not? And this one's sort of almost going, yeah. So I take my profile now, ready for my profile now, Mr. DeMille. Perfect line coming out of the corner, and well-controlled background. It's not distracting at all. And you've got these lovely bright colours. It looked as if it's just come out of the shower, doesn't it? It's got all its feathers are all fluffed up, and it's like it will go sleek down, which is quite an unusual look. Again, we've got a little bit of the detail being lost because of some shadowing, but there's some lovely stuff happening on its head and which I really like. Another puffin. I showed my wife this, and she said, "Oh, it looks so sad," and it does a bit. And it's got its head tucked in. We've got a little bit more detail in here. Again, a well-controlled background. These long lenses that people use do tend to make good backgrounds, and so again, lots of lovely detail. And it does look like a sad puffin. So that makes me uncomfortable. I want to go and give it a hug. I don't know that it necessarily is a good thing to go hugging puffins, but it is a good, simple portrait of something that isn't like loud and proud like the previous ones. And we get wood pigeons in the garden. I keep wondering how I can keep them away, and I've realised that we can't. And so you look at them, and they are, the iridescence that you get is just lovely, and the iridescence on this one, this pigeon, is just gorgeous. Around there, you've got that's generally a bit brown otherwise, but there's this lovely stuff that's happening in amongst there. And I think you're showing me the environment that it's in, but I think we don't need all of what we've got there. And we're also having the white feathers in the sunshine thing, where in order to get that, you need to drop the exposure and try and bring it back in post-processing. But it's a pigeon in its environment, having a good sing, and why not? So it's there. You've caught it, nicely upright with the beak open. You've got a good angle, and the bird in that bush is well rendered. Again, possibly we're losing a bit there, but to me, all of this white stuff over here, which is the blossom of the plant, we don't really need. To me, the image is that bit, and as a record of that bird in that bush, it's fine. But if you want to do better in competitions, you really do need to crop away anything that's distracting. Your white is distracting, but the eyes are attracted to it. When you've caught the bird so well, so get in even closer with the cropping and lose the white blossom. The rest of it, lovely, nice little light in the eye and everything. Spectacular duck. So lovely control of the shapes and stuff. You've got the water is really attractive. You've got all this stuff happening here. The birds not so much of a reflection because it's a bit wobbly, but you've got enough of a reflection. And the bird nicely rendered, the eye and the bill, and the tail pointing up, and it's got some space to go into in the frame. That's a nice simple composition with that lovely water. I think that's the last one, yeah? No? One. 6 or 7 more. I better hurry up even more then. So here again, good background, the bird, good eye, good bill, and there's a little patch of sunlight or something has caught it. But this is the baby side of the bird again, which is lovely. And there's some good detail through there, and even to the feathers on the head pointing out at a funny angle. It's a little bit central. Again, I would lose some of the lighter area on the left-hand side just to tighten up the composition. Classic image. This is the sort of food they like. And you've caught it in mid perch, about to get in, or it's just swallowed something. Its crop looks quite big, so it's probably had quite a few berries. But it's it's nice and sharp, good feather detail, and well rendered, not too overexposed on the snow. I would still lose the left hand side just to tighten it again. But one of my winter, it's winter, so they've turned up slightly different from winter to. It's really interesting this because they're all over the place, birds, and the weather's all over the place. So here we've got what looks like it's on a beach, wet sand. There's some texture there. And I go to the text, M30. It's just what me as a human being that reads, I do. Because, the bird itself, again, I think it's a little bit underexposed. Its bright sand is well rendered. I think the bird, the camera said, oh, that's exposure for me. The bird needs a bit more light. There's plenty of sunshine. So we've lost detail in the feathers, and although it's very well rendered of the surroundings, the actual detail of the bird is not as well rendered as it could be. Hoopoe having a preen, and is it a portrait if you can't see its head? Yeah, probably. So you've got a lovely background that's the same colour as the bird. You've got a good base, which has got colours that are the same as the bird. And you've got some various other bits, but they're nice and sharp. They're not distracting. The only distraction for me is this light area up here. And I don't know whether you could probably just reduce its exposure a bit in post-processing. You can't really crop it off, because I think it may make it still too close. But it's well rendered. It's not just pecking around doing stuff. It's having a bit of a preen. It's done its feeding. It's nice and relaxed. Whereas this looks distinctly unrelaxed, doesn't it? It's got its neck up, which is great because you've then got an opportunity to get some light onto the breast feathers, which are just fantastically iridescent. Again, we're losing a bit of detail here because there is lots of that lovely iridescence in these other feathers. But a threat position, is it a defense position? Because its tail's up, its neck's up, it's really having a good look around and making itself big. But we've just lost the detail there. And less action here. We've gone from these greens very much to a blue, and good reflection of the bird. You've got lots of context. So again, you could probably get rid of some of the context. Just concentrate on the bird and its reflection and those lovely ripples. But we've got a little bit of the white birds and white feathers effect going on here, which is a shame because it's otherwise well placed in the frame and well rendered. And I mean, this is definitely a portrait of a hoopoe, but it's, the film The Usual Suspects, where they're all standing in front of the police identification line, which has got, now look, stand looking out, stand to the right, stand to the left. It's got a little bit of the stand to the right, stand to the left for me. But it's beautifully sharp all over, beautifully rendered, really well controlled background. But it's a frame filling picture of a hoopoe and it is a portrait of the Hoopoe. Lovely background, again, with control of the colours in the background. So you chose somewhere that was going to be the right colour, and you've got the yellows here. You're picking up all the same colours as the bird, with detail in the feathers, and a little cap light in the eye. So again, crop, because you've got a lot of information there that you don't already need, but that's nicely captured. That's the last one.
We now need to go to Sunday.
Do I go to ZZZZZ portrait winners?
Yes.
Will it do anything if I do that?
You just need to go.
Whoop! Oh, it's not changed on there.
No, I think once you're on full screen on there, it won't do that. Okay. On my mouse.
Blimey, I need to be faster.
Yes, I'm afraid you do.
I do.
Presumably that's the one you want to show first, yeah.
Yeah.
That should work now. I'm just gonna leave the other one open underneath. Be about that in a minute. Just need to push that.
What Derek's going to do now is choose his
There you are.
winner, his runner up, and I think and whichever one's in.
Yep. So, my winner is that one, which is the Mad Egret. Yep. And that's second. That's a commended. That's a commended. And that's a commended. Yeah, so there's 5, yeah. And the side on Hoopoe at the end nearly made it. And the black cat with the B nearly made it. But so that's those. Yeah.
Hold on to like action. And I think what I'll do before you do every bird, Derek, is I'll read out what it is. Right, I can see it.
Right. So when I just flick through, you'll explain what the bird is. Yep. Yeah. I need to do it a lot more quickly.
So,
This is
hang on, bear with me a second.
There's only 375 of these.
yeah.
I think you're going to flick through first, though.
Okay, that's a Delhi penguin. Sorry about my pronunciation.
Yeah. Okay. So, yep.
Robin, hummingbird, it says. Rock, osprey, tourmaline southern, European roller, waxwing, chestnut-breasted something, pallid swift, white stork, waxwings, black-headed gulls, peregrine, pied parrot, puffin, Montague's harrier, little egret, pied kingfisher, green-fronted dancebill, little egret, greenbacked hillstar, and newt swan. Help everybody.
All the way back to so.
Sorry.
When you said mute swan,
Yeah,
it sounded like and mute swan.
The next one is a yellow-billed pet. Then it's a cattle egret, then puffin, then a green hermit, is that right? And then white-bellied woodstar, gannet, and waxwing.
Cool. Right. I need to be really fast. So I'm sorry if it's yours and you don't get a very long comment. So nice and simple. I love the way the action is the foot. So it doesn't have to be lots of action. So generally there doesn't have to be lots of flying, death-defying stuff going on. for it to be action. But here we've got action, line coming up. Again, you know, crop the top a bit. There's a lot of light up there, but it's a nice endearing pose, S-shaped composition with the lifted foot. It's a common garden bird. We see them all the time, but we don't often see them as well captured as this. You've got a worm in its beak. It's got its feet up. It looks like it's about to land on something, but you know, lovely feather detail, and the background's absolutely great, and it's good and sharp. So you know, it's very well separated from the background and beautifully rendered and a good position. So similar sort of position. Look at that, it's just glorious, isn't it? Absolutely wonderful. So this is glorious. I just wish it was eating from a different coloured flower, because it's sort of fighting this lovely colour, this magenta-y sort of colour, fighting with the hummingbird, which is otherwise well placed. And you don't need that one. You've got a natural drop line there. But you know, that's beautifully called. Little less frenetic, you know, not action, but it's just stretching its wings. How are you feeling today? Did that just go whoosh? Rough. So perhaps it wasn't worth it, but you can see where it's not stationary, it's walked across, and there's some lovely shapes going on there. There is an awful lot of other stuff happening that I don't think we need. Lots of context. So although those shapes are good, the reflection is good, and that's good, I think that the image is in there rather than all of it. So nicely cropped. You've got it. It's got space to fly into. It's got space it's come from. It's a bird, so it wants to be up. So we need it to be up in the frame rather than down. And that's all lovely. I think it's been pulled a lot. We're losing, it's getting a bit watercolory if you look at it closely. But it's a shame because the shape of the osprey is fantastic. The shape of the bird in its talons is fantastic. And where it is in the frame is really good. But I think we're just losing a bit of ultimate image quality. You know, otherwise, it's really simple and very effective. And you're looking at my bird. But yeah, there's a bit of perhaps it's hello. And this one is just gorgeous. The tail feathers, the iridescence here, the little bit of tongue poking out, and the sort of looks a bit of a submissive posture. The other one's up like this. I wish that this one was as sharp as that one, because once you've got that bird there with light areas and this dynamic between them is really important. Once that one's not in focus, I think you've lost a lot of the power of the image, and it's almost, you could almost crop that one completely and just have that one, because that one being out of focus to me is too distracting. Whereas this, look at the shape of that in the frame, up from the corner, goes round, joins on with that one. There's, you know, that lovely shapes, a well-controlled background, not too distracting. And, you know, the relationship between those two birds is obviously something going on. And the feather detail, the rendering is just delicious. As I said, I haven't seen these waxwing influx that's happened, but they're tremendous birds. But here, I think this, you've not quite got your point of focus right, or you've used a longish exposure. So we've got some sharpness over here, but the bird itself isn't sharp. Its position is fantastic, you know, the wings down, but I think we've lost too much sharpness to really get away with putting it up. It's, you know, the eye has gone. Whereas here, the sharpness is fantastic. You know, you look at along the feather lines here, you can see how the feather bits interlock with each other. You've got the backlit bird here. You've got it about to attack this one. And all that's lovely. Exposure is lovely. The background is lovely. And this sort of nearly made the cut, he said, giving away a result. But as with the one where we've got the bird one sharp, one out of focus, we've got not a whole bird and then not a whole bird, which is a shame because the stuff that we've got is absolutely delicious, wonderful, beautifully rendered, lovely and sharp. But I want the other bird to be there, and it's not. It's probably, oh, I can't change it. I can't zoom my lens out. Nice simple composition, beautiful detail on the feathers, and it's again it's got space to fly into. And I probably take a little bit off the right hand side, but very simple. And you know, these things go screaming around the environment. We haven't got them. We had them in our previous house, so nesting in the roof. And I keep trying to persuade my wife we need some swift bricks. Haven't yet persuaded her, but nice and simple. From a small bird that hardly ever lands to a bird that doesn't looking at it, but it ought to be able to fly. Great big, bringing in something that weighs more than a swift to put onto this understated and shy retiring nest. But it's coming in, primaries out, slowing down, and it's just about to drop all this on the nest to keep building it. And the bird shape is lovely, undercarriage down, little bit in the shade here, but nicely placed in the frame. 2 wax wings, if only, because it's like the red arrows. In formation, the wing shapes are the same, their eye lines are the same, the tail feather lines are the same, and the detail in there, were they sharp, would be absolutely lovely. But you just missed your point of focus, or you've got some motion blur. But that's pin sharp there, that bit down in the bottom. So it's a focus issue. And which is a shame because otherwise the positioning on those is absolutely fantastic. Gulls having a squabble, which they do, and we've got the white bird effect again. But you know, a good interaction there. That beak is separate from that bird. This one's coming down. Night heron, actually, isn't it? I'm doing my night heron impersonation. You know, they're really having a go at each other. And this one, I'm ambivalent about whether I want that to be there or not. But now I'm thinking, it's a gas it's out of here. But you know, good background and a nice little moment. And do you think it's had something to eat? It's live. But on their fantastic aerodynamic shape, just beautiful. And it's flying along, and then you've captured it in mid-flight. Very simple background, and you know that little wingtip raising, which is removing, and everything's tucked in. It's a really good study in the aerodynamics of a peregrine. Bigger bird, not flying quite so fast. And I've said about nice good background, nice bokeh. With this one, that I find the background incredibly distracting. Where you've got all these tightly together lines, and something very odd is happening up here. I don't know what, but these lines don't mean that the separation that I want from the bird with the background doesn't quite happen, because again, it's a good shape. So I find the background a little bit too distracting. You think it's quite a big body and quite short wings. And so it's having to work quite hard, running across the water surface, getting up there. But you know, you're really working hard with those wings, and really giving it a little extra bit of lift by paddling across the surface. Lovely exposure on the head this time, losing a bit on the shoulder. So puffins are quite a pain, but it's well placed in the frame, and I like the way it's running off to the right hand side. Whereas here we've got a bigger bird flying out of the sky, and I can't quite work out what it's doing with its head, but it's really sort of going down here. And if I was down here in a prey item, I'd be slightly worried. So it's in a good place in the frame, but we're losing again detail. We've lost a lot of information here. As an ID picture, you saw that, it's fantastic, but I'm showing all the detail of the bird and trying to get as much as I can in the way of points. It's falling down because it's lost a bit too much, because it's another egret, I remember the first time I saw one of these in the UK. I said, "What's that? It's an egret." Heavens! And now, oh, it's an egret. It's like living in Oxfordshire and seeing a red kite for the first time when we moved there, and then oh, there's 17 red kites flying over. Oh, red kites. No, not at all. But it's common. But coming into land, undercarriage down, flaps down, really sort of dragging off. You know, big tail out to slow it down, and that's well placed, and it's just about to splash down in this area here, and we've lost any sort of distractions in the background, so it's come down quite well. Couple of kingfishers having a squabble. This one, I thought, well, I can't quite tell whether it's not fit. It's deep, but you know that's their favourite fishing coast, and one of the other ones wants to be on there, and you know it's coming in really sort of for the kill, and there's a good dynamic between the two, and it's a nice neutral background. Hummingbird with lichen, which is all very curious, but it's got its tongue out. And again, the fantastic things, iridescence, you've got lovely iridescence, you're relatively slow shutter speed, so you've got the movement of the wings showing, and it's coming along. It's disappearing a little bit into that bronze. And again, you've got some light areas at the corner that you can crop out to get those away. But I would just want that exposure lifted a little bit more on the bird. I was trying to think some really clever pun to do with having an egret standing on your bum. But yeah, I mean, that's a beautifully observed moment. A slow speed action event, and a nice contrast between the bird and the deer, and there is a little bit of movement there. The deer's eating the food, and the egret's got its eye out. So there is some slow speed action going on there, but nice simple composition again. Love the hoopoe, complete with sort of flies in the out of focus background. Some are in warm places that's got lots of insects. It's a real pain because you get out of focus insect, but it's coming in. Look, it's got all of its brakes out to slow it down to go into what looks like its home. And again, we've got good colour. You know, that's hoopoo colour, and that's what it's got coming in. It's got room to slow down. It's doing the sort of slowing down thing. It could have something to do with losing a bit of quality. And I looked at this several times and then went, oh, funny, there's a parasitic wasp on it. And you've got the bird with a short shutter speed, so the wing movement has stopped. You've got the droplets being knocked off the fuchsia, so the water droplets. And then you've got this parasitic wasp with another one up here. Apparently sat on the body of the hummingbird, which has got its head in order to be able to in order to get all the stuff coming off this fuchsia plant, and all that is absolutely lovely. That I don't like, so I would clone that out if you're allowed to do that. But you know, all this is just and that's with the wasp on it is extraordinary. White bird in the sunshine. You know, swans make this incredible noise when they're fighting with each other. So there's another one out of frame here, and this one's coming in and going, scaring it off and doing something. And I can imagine the noise because they really do make a lot of noise. And you swans, or they've just landed, but with the neck, it looks as if they're having a go. But we've lost too much whiteness in the feathers. I think a little less exposure would have helped here. I think. Nice interaction. You're looking at my bird. I eat round here. No, I eat round here. No, I eat round here. And that one's coming in, so the talons out. This one's twisting away. And that's a lovely little action vignette, and they both look as if they want to sort of take over the world, don't they? They're definitely large. completely neutral background and some interesting shapes. Said about white bird detail, and just look at the detail that you can get on a white bird if you get the exposure on. I mean, this is absolutely fantastic. All this detail through here. Light's coming across at a bit of an angle, but there's lovely, lovely stuff. And you've got this shape here. You know, this bird is looking to the left towards what's going on here. This one's got its wings up like an angel. And that whole shape is just lovely. I would crop off that because it's light, but otherwise, you know, that's just a lovely family group at feeding time. Isn't it good that we don't feed like this? And on the subject of feeding, so here we've got what goes in and what comes out. And this is definitely action. It might not be a particularly lovely bit of action, but you know, it's got a reasonably well controlled foreground and background. The bird is in a strong place. It's on the asymmetric off center. And then you've used a shutter speed. Luckily, it's not on focus, but you used a shutter speed, and there's some interesting shapes and whatever happening. And you think, has all that just come out of there? Extraordinary. So it's a very well controlled action, just slightly unusual action shot of a puffin. I said about the previous hummingbird where we had one in focus and one not in focus. And here we've got an absolutely luscious hummingbird, tongue out, beautiful, beautiful detail on the body, real beauty in the iridescent. And it's coming towards this flower. But its flower, its nectar source, is really, really out of focus. And I want that to be as sharp as that. And if that can't be as sharp as that, then I don't want that to be there. So, you know, because it's red and it attracts our attention, blurry, and I think there's enough going on in that hummingbird on that side. You don't actually need the left-hand side of it at all, because that's so lovely. Here we've got another hummingbird without a red flower. And again, they're just beautiful things. We've lost a little bit of detail, I think, moving. You've got a relatively long exposure. We've got the tongue coming out, there's lots of movement in the wings with a good background. Here, I do want there to be a flower because I don't think the shape is quite as good as that one. But it's still really nicely captured. Another bird coming in with all its flaps out, tail out, you know, feet out to slow it down, and a good shape coming out of the corner, going towards the corner, and it's got sort of landing intent on its face, losing compared to the egret, just losing some detail in the wings. Really nice shape. Another waxwing, and again we've got good focus, lovely on the plants here, lovely background, beautiful background, but the bird itself, even though it's in a good position, is just not, which is a shame. So now I go, you need to do something as well, don't you?
The Sally's going to do something.
I'll make sure you get the right folder.
Sally has to do.
He has magic
Actually,
fingers.
no, you can do this. I'll just put it up to full screen. There you go.
Grazie. So, even though I don't like that, the rest of it is so interesting. You know, the hummingbird, the nectar flying about, and that wasp. That's my winner. And then that's really close, but that's second, which means that that one gets commended, and that one gets commended. And that one gets commended. Even though we might not necessarily like the subject so much.
Oh, right, okay, we're gonna have a fairly short break.
I've been talking too much.
Yes, but it's fascinating and really educational, so I'm not allowed, I'll get told off for saying this, but keep it up. It's really, I'm really finding this very interesting indeed.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll take a short break here and I'll be back with you in not much more than 5 minutes.
I just love the egg-shapedness of this. You know, it's like a feathery egg with, and how does it fly with those tiny, it's like a feather bumblebee, isn't it? The wings just look so small. But you know, there's lots of lovely detail through here. Beautiful feather detail, nice eye catcher, and you know, reasonably well controlled background, and a bit of mint. But you know, well placed. I would crop off a bit of it, but I just love how that's rendered. It looks so sort of perky. It's not changing.
Use the arrows.
Use the eyes.
No, the arrow's not changing it either.
These things are sent to so which do you want now? It's the, which one are you on? Oh no.
The next one would be the barn owl, yeah.
I hardly dare walk away.
Yes, working. Okay, so barn owl, classic owl position, head twisted round looking at us. Again, good background. The bird itself, we're losing a bit of sharpness. And again, you know, we don't need the light things on the edge, the out of focus things on the edge, when we've got that lovely face looking at us. The image is in here. I don't mind the completely artificial looking electric fence, because you've got the contrast. It tells me it's out in the country really good. We've got lovely feather detail, but I think we're losing too much by having all the rest of this. Now we're in a completely different environment. We're in this beautiful sunny day where you've got blue sky reflecting, then slices of ivory here reflected in the water. Beautiful pattern and lovely stuff going on here. And that classic red eye. We went into a place called Loon Lake in the States and saw absolutely none at all. Really disappointing. But hey ho, not even a waxwing. Another barn owl. Backlighting is lovely. Light shining through. Probably a bit. This is the complication. Well exposed here, and then we're losing detail here. So it's almost, if you can, doing an in-camera HDR or something, so that you're getting the detail here, or just expose for the brightest area, so you keep the lovely detail there, and then bring up the brightness in the shadowy side of the bird in post-processing, because it's a little bit too dark, and we're losing that fantastic information there. Other than that, you know, it's well framed, a mark all around it. It's like a little angel. Pointing angel if you're a vole. Completely different sort of lighting. We've got good control here, lovely catch light with a lovely top light on the beak and these little feathers here. And they're very photogenic little things, aren't they, with well rendered leaves and a lovely background. So that's beautifully placed in the frame. There's no extra space and nothing on the edges, and the bird itself is well done. Have you ever had an argument with your partner? Because I looked at this to start with and thought, oh, it's a couple of peacocks. And I thought, actually, they just look as if they've had a row. And she's saying, why do you get all the nice shiny clothes? He's looking down, looking a little bit sheepish. And I just love that distance between them, which is one whole peacock's worth of distance. And the fact that she's looking out and he's looking a bit bemused. You know, I don't mind the loss of detail here, because I like the relationship of the two birds and the background is nice and not too distracting. I just love that sort of, we've had a bit of a row. Here, very simple. There's been a lot of images with very good, simple controlled backgrounds. They're not distracting at all. So here we've got, again, we've got a foreground colour, a colour in the frame that matches part of the colour of the bird. It's nicely complementary. It's a good, confident pose with little bits of the stuff going on. Enough detail there, probably. So it's a good, strong, simple image. This is probably one of the better waxwing images. It's got a good base that it's on. The bird itself is well rendered. It looks pretty sharp, but it's a portrait format image in a landscape format frame. For me, it's that bit that's the driver and not all the rest of the blue. So you could, crop in some more and make rid of the extra material in your frame. This could have been in action. We've got a bird bath in the lawn, in the front of the lawn. It's amazing what we get in there. And you fill it up, and then a pigeon has a bath in there, and you go out, and it's almost completely empty because it just splash all over. And it's fantastic watching them doing it. And you've got lots of action going on here, so it's not quite sharp, but good 15th or whatever of a second. So we've got long streaks, loads and loads of movement. And I really like the feel that it's really getting in amongst it. Whereas we've calmed down, everything's a little bit quieter. So we've got lovely, lovely detail on the birds. It's got a wet beak, so you've got a little bit of shine. But again, you've got a lot of information that you don't need. You've got it going into a space, but the space above it is too big, because all that's lovely, but there's an awful lot of it that's not bird. Cormorants. We went down by the Severn a couple of weeks ago, and there were some cormorants sitting on an electricity cable. I always find a little bit incongruous. This great big bird sat on a sort of thin cable, and it's sort of doing this a bit. But it's well placed in the frame. It's looking into the space. You've got cormorant colours in the background. You've got the water, but we really have lost too much information on the breast fin. And it's a bit fuzzy. You've still got the blue eye, but it's a little bit going too soft for me, because the composition is lovely. Mute swan. And again, like the egrets earlier on, we've got some beautiful feather rendering here, lots of lovely detail, and it's you can't help photographing them because they're a fantastic shape, even though they're paddling away like mad underneath. You've got this lovely bird that's tucked in a bit, not really feeding, and I got a picture of them the one in the floods in Worcester, and it's the rugby pitch for one of the schools, and then there's a swan dabbling effectively in front of the flooded rugby goals. It's very ping-pong. Waxwings. And it's great. It must have been fantastic to see them. I hate you seeing them again. But the thing about a flock of birds is that you have to be really, really lucky when you press the shutter that they don't get in each other's way. And here you've got this one, which is in a strong place in the frame, that's in the way of that one. There's two here, but you can't really see what's going on. That one's looking down very disapprovingly, and this one said, "I'm not having any of this. I'm off." So it's a little bit too fussy and complicated, but it must have been fantastic to be there and watch them. Whereas seeing this, you've got the same thing about old crest, firecrest. They're little birds with small wings, and you wonder how they can fly, because the wings just don't look big enough to lift the bird up. And nicely caught at an angle. It's looking up into the pine canopy. Nice leaf. We've got a bright area here that looks like a man with one leg, actually, on the corner, on this edge here. And edges are distracting if you've got a light thing, so you can lose that. But that's really lovely what's happening with the bird. And having a good sing, beautiful control of background, lovely green, complementary with all the leaves. And then you've got a bird that's a different colour. So you've got some good lines coming in, and it's really having a good scene in amongst there. I always like these images where you've got a bird singing on a really cold day and you can almost see the notes coming out in its breath. But it's a little bit central. I would again crop off the left hand side because we've got light areas there. But nice action. Caught at the moment of the berry is taken into the bird, and you know you've got they really open their beak a long way, don't they? But again, we've got that slightly missed point of focus, whereas there's some sharpness elsewhere. I think it's know where your focus point is, but it's just missed it. I've set up both my camera bodies. I did have 4 camera bodies, but I sold 2 recently. I've only used the central focusing point, and it means I focus and reframe, focus and reframe. It always works for birds in flight, but just make sure that your subject is in focus. Great expression. We've got a wax ring doing what they do, eating the seeds, and then a red kite saying, I'm going to go and find a dead rabbit or some chicken. We've lived in Worcester now for 2.5 years, and we've seen 1 red kite. We lived in Watchfield, and we saw cougars in Oxfordshire. So it's a great kite. Whereas if we'd still been living in Oxfordshire, it's all great. But again, what I said about your main subject being the right size in the frame, we've got lots of context. It's rooting in this tree, it's having a rest, but there's an awful lot of this image that isn't the bird, and I would want there to be a closer up shot. You know, the image of the owl, it was much bigger in the frame, much the same sort of like that, and I would want this to be as big in the frame as the owl was in the frame. And this is a Subutio, because they wanted to call it Hobby originally, didn't they? And they weren't allowed to have the trademark Hobby, but they called it Subutio, Subutio. So the little table football game is which I think really cool. Because I think, what's this got to do with football? But beautiful background again, complementary colour. That colour and that colour work really well together. And you know, it's well placed in the frame. It's a teensy-weensy bit softer than the eye, but it's a well rendered portrait of that bird. No babies, but a good couple portrait, nice and big in the frame. Lots of lovely detail. Those red eyes must be amazing. What does their vision look like? Do they see in different colours to us? Because we've got clear corneas, and they've got, you know, bright red ones. Must be affecting how they visualize colour, which is really interesting. And it's really nice the way that you've got these browny, reddy tones and matching in the feathers at the top. Robin. The robin in the action one was really busying itself and doing stuff and worms, and this is doing the sphere with a tail impersonation, which they do. And you know, again, it looks a little bit sad, but I just want there to be a little bit more sparkle in the bird. The background's lovely, but I just want a little more exposure in the bird. It's in the sun, and a little twinkle in the eye, something to just lift it away from the background a bit. It's a wax ring. You know what I said about the other one needing to be a portrait format image? This is what I meant. So it needs to be like that without the stuff over here. So, you know, that edit has been introduced here. So much tighter for me. So still a little bit off the top, but well placed in the frame, good support, beautiful rendering through. It's been pulled a little bit to me, but much tighter composition than the previous one. This is just so sweet. So you've got, like the other little one with a little baby, you've got this one's a little bit further advanced than the other two. So you've got these 2 little heads poking out, but a beautifully rendered bird. Nice clean background, context, doesn't matter what it's showing. We've got lots of light because there's some lightness. The rendering through here is just lovely. good broken reflections, and it's moving along quite comfortably. A happy little family of grebes, and it like so you looking at my bird, it does really look quite aggressive, doesn't it? And yeah, it's a lovely position, lovely sort of angle to it, walking along. And you know, there's a sort of mean look in its face, and I don't mind that there's an awful lot of foreground. I would probably lose the light bit on the top, because then we're not getting distracted by that lightness, which is lighter than the lightest part of the bird. But that's a lovely angle. Cormorant doing something else. I'm swimming. They look so sleek, don't they, in the water, so low, and they just sort of glide through it. The little bow wave that's picking up some green from surroundings, but a lovely sort of sinuous angle. They always give me the impression a bit of swimming with their heads up. So there's some nice shapes going on there, and some barn owl at night, and a little catch like that. I suspect you've used a flash or a torch or something. And I took a picture of a Cape Eagle owl down in Hermanus in South Africa a number of years ago, and it was the B&B that we were staying at. It was just on an outbuilding, and it was right sort of here. I held my camera up, and it was a really long exposure. And I said, "I'm terribly sorry about this," and boom, used the flash, and it came out, and its eyes were bright red. Because of the internal reflections in its retina, and it looks really scary. And it wasn't there when we came back. Presumably, it was able to fly. But I did feel guilty about it. But I do like the separation of the bird against the night background, with the catch lights, and it's looking straight at us. And we've got a nice amount of feather detail, including the white bits. And a duck that looks as if it's fallen in a paint box, I always think, but just so brightly coloured. But there's a perfect example here of what happened, especially this is a little bit out of focus. The other bits of the book are, but that's out of focus and in the sunshine, and it's just turned to complete white, which is a shame because there's some lovely stuff happening and a reflection that isn't overexposed. This is just gone completely. It's a shame because it's a huge thing. Good background, nice shape coming up out of the corner, twisted round in an S. But I think as with the duck before, there's a little bit too much exposure on the light parts of the bird. So we've lost feather detail, which you could have. It could be absolutely glorious, but we're just losing the white and losing the differentiation between the individual feathers. Great positioning. That's coming in from the right hand side. It's got space to go into. It's got a really strong wing position with the lovely shape of the primaries and nothing too distracting in the foreground. The only thing that's slightly distracting this is that the tail is in focus and the eye is not quite in focus. And I said about the portrait, it needs to be in focus. So I love the shape of that. I still really like the image, but that lack of sharpness on the eye just took away a little bit for me. And a mute swan, that shape that they make is absolutely glorious. I just love it when they do this. And being near Worcester, when the day we moved in, we were shifting stuff around. I heard this and two swans flew over the house. And they make this incredible whistle with their wings. It's like, oh, welcome to Worcester. And the following week, we had 5 great long-tailed tits dipping into the bird bath with this little row of 5 tails poking up. And I thought, I don't know where my camera is in all this. And they didn't do it again, which is a shame, but with a nice greeting as well. So, a classic shot of the swan. Well-controlled background, we're on the river, beautiful reflection, and lots of lovely detail. A little bit lost perhaps, but what a fantastic thing. So that's the last one, and now we do the Winners, Berks. I've done that, but I don't know how to do the bit that magic stuff that you do.
Yeah. Oops.
It works. We're allowed to have 2 gold crests in the final slip. They are cute, aren't they? I've been flipping between, but I think I've made a final decision now. So that's my winner, which are the agreed, and that is just so cute. And so that's my second, and that means that the others, that one and that one and that one, just shaved it, gets a commended. Yeah. That's like a child's drawing of a bird, isn't it?
I'll just need to, we have a bit of admin to do. So, in that we may need to organise the vote online. Find my mouse.
I've got the 3 winners into the folders.
Okay, let me just do one thing before I come back to that. Okay, that's done.
Morning.
Which file are they in, Jane? Oh, yes, sorry.
When I was at Grossanto starting that talk, with lots of panics up to Mass Rock, and Swallow, you got a mirror reflects Swallow's neck, needs some heat, and fantastic pictures of gannets. And this is the days before you could see whether you've got a good shot or not. You remember those days? It's so disturbing.
So we get to the voting part of the evening for everybody.
So I'm not involved in this at all.
You are, because you're
uncontrolled.
really quicker.
Uncontrolled.
Derek's going to click through the 3 possibles, and then we're going to ask you to vote. So in order to everybody, oh, I'm not sharing the screen, am I? Hang on, doing it again. That's better. Is that okay, Elaine?
It's not clicking through at the moment.
They're not clicking. I think there's something about when I share the screen. Again. Sorry? Well, you need to let them, give them a chance to have a few fixed too, because as soon as the poll comes up, you won't be able to see the picture. So you've got the Catholic Eagle is the portrait, Great Crested Grebes from the Virgin Berkshire, and the green-backed Hill Star from Flight in Action. So it's up to us now to decide. Right, are we ready to vote? Right, let me put the lights up so we get a chance of being able to see you. Elaine's going to run the poll on Zoom, and we'll vote here. So we've got that one up at the moment. So who wants to vote for the greenback hill star? I'll make that 11. I'd like to move on to one of the others, Derek. Thanks, I was not going again.
It's not, oh, that was at the end, right.
Right, who wants to vote for the Greens? 7. Can't read anything into this, we don't know what the vote online is like. And finally, the Catholic Egret. Oh, we are in the minority. 4. Right, so we really have the results as well from online.
72% at the moment.
Sorry?
Got 72%. So 5 people haven't voted,
We're wait and check the hooks while the other 5 vote.
assuming that they're going to.
Can I ask anybody who's going to vote very quickly, because we're about to end the poll. There's only 13 people out of 18 have participated. Would the other 5 of you like to vote?
Oh, of course, 2 of them are us.
Oh, 2 of them are us. Well spotted. Okay, would the other 3 of you like to vote? Oh, we've got one more. Yeah, but it's going to make a... I'm assuming then that the other 2 people don't want to vote. If you're going to, I'll give you no more than 15 seconds to do so. Unless you've written it in chat. Have they had anything in chat about it? No, that's about it. Okay, we'll close the poll. And you like that results? Yeah. So what? That's it. 4 for Catholic Egret, 4 for the Hill Star, 4, 4, and 6 for Great Christy Grebes. So online the votes were 4 for the Egret, 4 for the Hill Star, and 6 for the Great Crested Grebes. Right. Which gives the Hill Star the overall prize by 2 marks. So congratulations.
So that's good. It's not time, so if you just read out the commended second and first for portrait. Is that no, that's not portrait.
You can tell we're really well rehearsed at this, can't you? Okay, so I'm going to go and give you the names now. For the portrait category, the commended, the blue whistling thrush and the crested tit were both by Nancy Massey, and the West Northian warbler was by Dave Lyons. So well done to those 3 for the commended. And the second, the Great Reed Warbler, was by Mike, who I believe is sitting in front of me. So would you like to come down and get your prize, please? Well done, lovely photo.
There's one.
And then we get to my favourite, which is the first prize, the Catholic Egret, was by Sue Truby. And Saturday's not here, so we'll pass on the prize to her when we get there. I'm just going to move the screen on, if I can, to the winner of the... Which one they call
Flight and Action is the yeah, that's the Hill Star.
Yeah. And for the Flight and Action, the commended, the Robin, was by Marilyn Hockney. Well done. The Catholic Egret again by Sue Truby. She's a woman after my own heart. I love Catholic Egrets. Puffin, that was also commended, was by Rebecca. Is that Reese? Reese. Yeah. The second prize, the European rollers, were by Brian Winter. Wow. And the winner, the Greenback Hill Star, was by Brian Hutchins.
Which also won this.
Who also won the prize. sadly not here, I'm afraid. And in the birds in Berkshire, the commended, the gold crest was by Sue Truby. She's having a good night. The peacocks, oh, go on.
Paul Jaskowski.
Thank you. The Chiffchaff was by Mike Smith. So those are the three commended. The second prize gold crest was by David Flory, who is not here, I don't think. No. And the first was the Great Crested Grebes was by Dave Rhymes. Excellent.
What posting to do?
Yeah, so sadly we don't have.
Oh, do you want to say anything?
Yeah, I've also brought a prize to the person that wins. Yes.
Oh, I'll put the whole. I'll leave the whole star back. Okay.
I also brought along a little prize. We've been sorting out some books at home. So I brought along a book called Triumphs in Bird Life, which is from 1931. And it's 6 addresses delivered by wireless. That's the original meaning of the word wireless rather than wireless now, by an Irish ornithologist called T.J. Patton. And it was given to G. Buckleton Brown, who was a urologist surgeon. And it's signed by the author from 1931. So that's the prize to the person that got the popular vote. So that's whoever goes with the cup. So that's from me.
Thank you very much, Derek. Well done, Derek. It's quite a mammoth task we ask of our judges, isn't it? Really, to not only have to make decisions, but then to come and tell us all about them. Personally, I found that extremely interesting and educational, and I can see a lot of people in the room nodding. I always hesitate at these circumstances to ask for feedback, but we would like to know if you like the new format, if you think it's better. So far, everybody who's said anything has said yes, so that's a good start. But don't feel you have to say that. But thank you all for coming. I hope you've all enjoyed it. Congratulations to all the winners, and a very big thank you to Derek for his excellent
Managing all the